I am so glad to be here. I'm Dana Wood, and I am presenting on this topic that you can read there. I'm just excited that you're here because I was going to be happy if there were 5 people, and I brought 2. So I thought if I get 3 more, I'm especially with it being the last thing of the conference, I thought you'd all go home. So thank you for staying. I feel really great about that. I was executive director of the Kansas Counseling Association for about 10 years before Kim took over, so this is near and dear to my heart, but I've been retired for 12 years from school counseling, so I'm extremely nervous and scared because I had to relearn how to do a PowerPoint, and I still don't know if I'll get the clicker part right, so, but let's get started. First of all, I want to tell you a little about myself. I call this my life in a nutshell, and I can make it a little easier to read maybe. I'm going to go through this. It takes about 2 minutes and 38 seconds, and it kind of reads like an obituary. But so I was born in Syracuse, Kansas in 1948. If you do the math, that means I'm 55, or not too good at math. Graduated from high school in 66, went to K-State. Graduated in 1970 and went to Holton, Kansas, and taught for a couple of years. Went back to K-State and got my master's in counseling in 73, and then my first counseling job was at Satana, Kansas for 3 years. In that time I was married, and then to that union were born 4 sons and 1 daughter in those years, over a 13-year period. In 1976 I went to Midwestern Baptist Seminary in North Kansas City, got my MDiv, and then became a full-time pastor in Ulysses, Kansas for 5 years. Then went to the missionary field with the Foreign Mission Board of the Southern Baptist Convention, and was there for about 5 years. Came home and pastored in Cimarron, Kansas. During that time, I became a bivocational pastor, doing both schoolwork and pastoring, and I was a school counselor in Copeland, Kansas. Then I moved to Bennington and Tesket, Kansas, where I was a counselor for about 5 years, I guess, and then during that time I was also assistant manager of Webster Conference Center. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's a Southern Baptist campground right outside of Salina. In 1998 I tried to start a corporate chaplaincy program in Salina, and that kind of fizzled, so I got back into school counseling I did it, I knew that would happen. School counseling in 2000, and I was in Salina for 6 years. During that time, I was divorced in 2005, and then I moved to Kansas City, and that's when I really came out, because Kansas City is a little easier to come out in than Salina. I was there for just a year, and then I finished my career in Topeka, and was there for 4 years. I retired in June of, I finally got my thingy to work. Retired in June of 2011. I moved to Palm Springs in 2015. I married my husband Sherman in 2019. And I said living the life from 2011 to present. I said that I've really lived my life, my whole life, but I'm really good at retirement, and I probably should have majored in that. But anyway, so that's a little bit about who I am, and now we're going to find out who you are. Okay, we're going to play a little game. You have to play. Well, there is one caveat. I may let some of you out. Anyway, I'm going to have you raise your hand. I don't care which one, and put your hand parallel to the floor. Okay, can you do that? Very simple. Okay, and then when I ask a category, if it fits you, raise your hand, okay? And then just put it down. I'll say okay, and you put it down. Very simple, right? Everybody can do that. The caveat is if this is to be private, so I want you to close your eyes and bow your head when we do this. And not yet. Just relax. And the reason for that is so that nobody can see. If you got your head down and your hand up, no one's going to know what you're doing. The caveat is if your wrist squeaks, like some old people's do, not that any of you are older than me, but
I am.
Okay, Beth, this is for you. If you can hear your wrist, you don't have to play. Okay, so I want it to be anonymous. I don't want you to feel nervous about answering any of these questions. Let's do a little practice. Okay, raise your hand. You don't even have to close your eyes this time. Raise your hand if you're human. Great, everybody. So, super. Raise your hand if you're an alien. Okay, oh, we got a couple. Okay. All right, you see how to play. So, I'm not going to take very long to do this. I'm not counting. I'm not looking to see who is what. I just want to get an idea of who we are in terms of the things I'm going to ask. So raise your hand, close your eyes, bow your head, and raise your hand if you identify as Christian. Okay? And when I say okay, put your hand back down. Okay. Raise your hand if you identify as Catholic. Okay. Raise your hand if you identify as Protestant. Okay. Raise your hand if you identify as an evangelical Christian. Okay. Raise your hand if you identify as Muslim. Okay. Buddhist or other Eastern religion. Okay. Jewish. Okay. Raise your hand if you identify as non-religious. Okay. And raise your hand if you identify as out in the LGBTQ community. Okay. And raise your hand if you identify as closeted in the LGBT community. Okay. You may put your hands down. You can look around. And now I know a little bit about you. And that's great. So we're going to go ahead. I want to share a little bit more about me, and that is just to make a comment about these highlighted areas, because you can see that a good portion of my life has been involved in an organization, the Southern Baptist Church, a very conservative church-oriented relationship. And so I mention that because I think it may give some credibility to me sharing on this level today. Okay, that's what I want you to know about me, because I've had to come through a lot to get where I am, and I want to share that with you in terms of your counseling experience. Please don't ever hear me say that I think you're doing a bad job or that you're letting your belief system get in the way. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying it can happen, and the only way we can keep it from happening is we're aware and we make a way not to. Okay, so how did we get here? Well, it was last fall. I was sitting around thinking, and I don't do that much because, like I said, I'm really retired. But some things were getting to me. The first one was that, the LGBT teenage and young adult suicide rate, which you all know is high. I'm not going to share a bunch of statistics because you all know it's high. And I guess it hit me because I've had some young people that I know do that, commit suicide, and it hurts. And so the other thing is the hate crimes that come, and a lot of those are related toward LGBT people. And then this probably was the straw that broke the camel's back, the rainbow flag incident. And this happened to a dear friend in a Kansas town, a small Kansas town, was relating the story to me about how one of the teachers in the district where her kids go to school had a rainbow flag on her bulletin board. She hadn't even mentioned it. She just put it up there knowing that, gay kids sometimes know that that's a safe symbol. And so it was on a bulletin board, and the superintendent came to her room and asked her to remove it because a patron had gone to a school board member. And so there was no action involved in terms of they didn't call her on the carpet or anything. They didn't have a school board issue about it. They just asked her to remove it. And I thought, oh, how sad is that? Because if anything, our gay kids need to know that they can have a safe place. And so I thought, I've got to say something. And then I thought, who am I going to say it to? Because I drink coffee every day with a bunch of old gay guys, and they don't want to hear about what I'm thinking. I mean, they hear about it all the time. So then I realized that it was time to call for presentations at the KCA convention, and that's near and dear to my heart. And I'm just so excited that you're here. So let's go on. So my question was, why all the hate? And as I began to think about the hate, I came up with the question, where does anti-LGBT bias originate? Where did it come from? And I came up with one of the logical answers is that it goes all the way back, and it's very related to religious organizations. And it doesn't matter if you're Muslim or Jewish or Christian, the writings of those groups have verses, all of them, that speak negatively about homosexuality. And the whole point is that we come up through whatever we come up through, and we have a belief system. So what we're going to do today, we're going to do three things. We're going to do some examining, and some explaining, and then hopefully the extension is what you take away from here. And we're going to do it this way because I was a pretty good little Southern Baptist preacher boy, and in seminary we were taught that a good sermon has 3 points, a poem, and a prayer. And I've already got you to bow your heads once, so. And also my 3 points all start with the same letter, extra points. So that's what we're going to do. Okay. So what does examination mean? Well, it means that we look inside ourselves. And that's why I did this thing privately, because I don't want anybody to know what you're thinking about your beliefs, but I think it's good for you to examine what you're thinking about your beliefs and where they come into play in your life and in your work, okay? Everybody has a belief system. Your belief system is the invisible force behind your behavior. So it is important because what we believe comes out in the actions that we do. And so I think it's very important. And it's not necessarily static. What you believe today has evolved over the years of your life, and it may not be the same. Obviously for me it's not the same. I can tell you I do not believe the same way that I did when I was standing in a pulpit preaching in a Southern Baptist church, okay? So it makes a difference. And the truth, religion has played a major role in the bias against the LGBT population of history. That's just fact. So you can argue it, I guess, but you won't get very far because if you actually look at history, you'll see that it's there, okay? So, how do we navigate the slippery slope? And it is a slippery slope because generally we don't talk about what we believe, okay? It's personal, it's private, it's not up for debate, it's protected, it's off limits, it's not part of the interview. You don't go to an interview and have somebody ask you what church you go to, right? Right? Okay, well, I just wonder if you're still awake. All right, so I decided that I would take every single religion there is and teach you what they believe about about LGBT people, okay? And I realized very, very quickly that that's not a 3-hour course, that's a 12-hour course in college, and so it's undoable in 50 minutes. So I Googled it, and oh, I forgot this slide. This is another reason why, and I'll just go to that before I get into it. The American Counseling Association Code of Ethics, this was adopted in when? Oh, come on. Great, who said that? Wonderful. 2014 this was adopted. And this is section A, 11B, under values within termination and referral. Counselor, oh, I did it again. I hate that. I hate that. There. Counselors refrain from referring respective and current clients based solely on the counselor's personally held values, attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. And the reason that's important is because when I was a young counseling student, I think I was older than most of you young counselors because you look so young. I don't know how you do it. Anyway, that wasn't in the Code of Ethics. In fact, we were taught if you're dealing with somebody and you can't get along with what they're believing, and just refer them. Get them to a counselor that fits. And this says something different. It says that counselors respect the diversity of clients and seek training in areas in which they are at risk of imposing their values onto clients, especially when the counselor's values are inconsistent with clients. So it's my responsibility as a counselor to take care of that, not to just pass that person on. And I thought that was pretty important for us to think about before we go to this. And this is when I Googled, what am I going to do with this talk? Because I'd already said I'd do it. And I found this doctoral dissertation. The lady that wrote it is named Dawn Moon, and she's at Marquette University, and her paper is called Beyond the Dichotomy. And she starts out by talking about the dichotomy itself is the big chasm is, on the one side you believe that you're born gay, or on the other side you believe that gay is a choice. And that's really at the basis of that religious discussion, because you believe one way or the other. And it's debatable. Like for centuries, as I said, it goes all the way back. And I just put duh in there because I could. And then I want to share my view right up front, because my view is that I was born gay. Okay? I don't think that there's any way that any of the people I know, and I know a lot of gay people, none of them would tell me that they chose to be gay. Okay? That's just not That's just not part of who we are, and yet that's part of the argument. So this paper chose to go beyond that, and so what she has done is taken think of it as a spectrum, and on one side of the spectrum is the most conservative, homo-negative view, and on the other side is the most, and I hate using conservative and liberal because that gets so political, but let's face it, it's a political issue. So, but the least conservative view over on the other side is a homo-positive view. So we're going to go through those 6 things, and as we do, think about where you fall, because it's still a continuum, and you may fall between the cracks, but that's okay, because you have a belief, and you believe something about gay people, okay? So, the first one is God hates fags, and that's very common right here in Topeka, because that was brought to light very firmly by Westboro Baptist Church, and you all are aware of that. That made national news when the Westboro people went all the way around the country picketing gay events, and it is very conservative. It's inherent in the doctrine of many conservative religions. I sang in the gay chorus in Kansas City, and often as we would go into the theater to sing our concerts, we would have to pass the Westboro people with their signs, and they said exactly that: God hates fags. Okay, so that is a theology. I think this one, I don't just keep doing that. I think this word here is important. Politicization has brought this to the forefront. I think it has become political to the extent that a lot of people who shout that phrase aren't doing it anymore because it's a religious belief that they have, but because it has become political in their life, okay? But nevertheless, it's out there. So, the next one is love the sinners, hate the sin. This one is less condemnatory, but it's still homo-negative. Because why? Because you just called me a sinner. Well, I know I'm a sinner because I know the Bible, and we're all sinners, right? But you just pointed out my sin, and I don't like that. So it comes across as very negative to me. And I didn't point out your sin, but you pointed out mine just by the fact that that's who I am. Okay? It's seen as homosexuality is seen as a sinful choice, a dysfunction, or a pathology, and thanks to the American Psychological Association, it's no longer seen as a pathology on the DSM-4, thank God, or an inherent disposition, which means it's only a sin if you act on it. So I can be gay, I just can't do anything gay. That doesn't fit. Okay, it's used frequently. It's not a biblical phrase. A lot of people think that comes right out of the Bible. There's not a verse that says love the sinners and hate the sin. You might ferret it out using different scriptures, but it's something that has come about as a way to handle not hating, and it's because a lot of conservative theologies can't go to the God hates fags thing because they don't believe God hates. Okay, and I like that. So in order to still stand against homosexuality, they have to say, well, we can love the sinner, but we're going to hate the sin. Okay. The next one says we don't talk about that, and that basically is kind of like the don't ask, don't tell thing, out of sight, out of mind. And there are a lot of faiths that handle homosexuality. I grew up in a church. I grew up in the Presbyterian church, and it was not talked about. Nobody mentioned homosexuality. The preacher never preached about it, and there were probably homosexual people in our church, and nobody knew about it because nobody talked about it. Okay, the problem with that is that it makes us invisible. And the compartmentalization can be good or bad. It's like I'm one person when I go to church, but I'm another person when I go out in the world. And even though the church might know about it, they don't acknowledge it. So I'm still in the closet. Does that make sense? And that's not necessarily a comfortable place to be. Okay, so the next one then is they can't help it. And this one is a little more homo-positive maybe. It is working toward acceptance because the theologies that adopt this say we can love this person because they can't help the way they are, but then they don't know how to handle the fact that being gay isn't easy and isn't necessarily a fun way to grow up. So they come up with the idea that, well, the pain that you have from being gay is just the price you have to pay. It's the cross that you have to bear. Well, you know, I preached about crosses that we have to bear quite a bit, and I don't really think that my sexual orientation is a cross that I have to bear. But that's the way that theology does. So all of those so far have been fairly homonegative. They've gotten better as we've gone along, but they're still not really very accepting. So the first homopositive one comes out as God's good gift. And this is the theology that you will find where you have lots of churches that are gay affirming and gay accepting, and they understand the scripture in a historical context. And by that I mean they look at history and they see how that scripture might have applied back when that story happened. And many times it's different than if you just take the word for word. Now, of course, this goes against the idea of the literalist, and many of the conservative churches say, you know, God said it, I believe it, and that's it, you know, it's true. Well, if you're going to be a literal person, you have a hard time with this, but looking at it historically, you can interpret those scriptures to not be such that homosexuality is the abomination that comes out when you read it literally. It sees homonegativity as a human failing rather than a godly mandate. In other words, the people that are hating fags, that's their failing, rather than blaming it on God because God hates fags, because he doesn't. Okay? Homosexuality is created by God and deemed good. And well, that kind of speaks for itself. Okay, so the last one then, this goes even further than I can go. It is it's called queer theology, and it says homosexuality and gender fluidity are seen as a choice which can bring one closer to God. So it's calling homosexuality a calling, and if I choose to be a homosexual, I can draw closer to God. Well, I have trouble with that because I don't know if I want to get closer to God if I have to be a homosexual to do it. So that one, this one doesn't relate to me, but it does relate to certain groups of people. I do like this part. It rejects the human identity categories in favor of individuals seeking God in all aspects of life. And I think if you're going to seek God and you do it as an individual, that's a healthy thing. I guess my major point here is that word choice, because choice doesn't fit in my theology, okay? This is just a little side note here. The American Indians were once called the homosexual people two-spirited people and revered them. They recognized them as visionaries, healers, medicine peoples, nannies, orphans, caregivers. And now, because of Western Christianity evangelizing a lot of those tribes, the gay people have slipped into invisibility again because some of the tribes have decided that they want to be Christian and they've come across as conservative. So that's kind of a sad thing. So those are the 6 things, all the way from God hates fags to it's God's calling to be a homosexual. So, did you find yourself? Anybody find themselves in there? You don't have to raise your hand, but shake your head. Okay, good. Because you're in there somewhere. That's the thing. As you go from one side to the other, you're in there. All right, so what do we do with that? Well, by way of explanation, many people of faith, regardless of their view about the moral value of homosexuality, stress that religion's overall message is to treat others with love and compassion. Showing love and compassion might include taking people seriously and listening to them as they relate their experiences of love, desire, and faith. Creating more understanding can change some minds, but need not change minds to have positive effects. Okay, so this is kind of our goal in terms of getting to where we get past what the belief can cause problems with, is to reach the point of love and compassion. Amen?
Amen.
Yeah, well, it is. I mean, I'll preach a little on this one because that's where we need to get to. And so the rest of the explanation is me giving you some information about religious bias from a gay person's standpoint. Okay, and you may not need that, but you're going to get it. So first of all, these are just things I want you to know. One of the things I want you to know, and I've already said it, choice is not in my vocabulary. Okay? I would never have chosen to be gay. I'm not sad I'm gay. I've had a wonderful life, and my life just keeps getting better. But I don't know of anybody, as I said earlier, that would choose to be gay, because it has a lot of inherent difficulties within it. It's not easy growing up gay. It's maybe easier today than it was when I grew up and back in the 60s, where you didn't even hear the word, well, gay wasn't a word then. It was the H word, and nobody said homosexuality because it was almost as bad as cancer, and nobody said the C word. So it's a difficult life. I don't think anyone would choose it. But I also want you to know that there's a difference between being gay and doing gay. Okay? Gayness is part of my being. It is my being. It's not something I do. Okay? You can do gay things. Good grief, anybody can do gay things. I can do straight things. I was married for 30 years. I did a lot of straight things, had 5 kids. I did some pretty straight stuff. But I'm not straight. I'm gay. It's my being. It's who I am. Okay? So the only choice we have is whether to come out and live authentically or not. And that's a big choice. And there are a lot of people today in the closet, and I honor them and revere them because, you know, they've not come to a point where they can do anything different. And I understand that because I didn't come out till I was 55. Oh, I just said earlier I was 55 now. Well, I blew that one. So when so I was a late bloomer. I didn't come out till very late in life. Okay. Another thing I want you to know is that society's angst toward us is felt continually. Okay. Now I've been very fortunate. I haven't had a hate crime done on me. I have had I don't even think I've ever been called a dirty faggot or anything. I mean, I've been very fortunate, but we still, even in that, we feel the angst of the world, of the society, of the culture. Gay people are never finished coming out. You see, every time we go into a new situation, we don't know if we're going to be accepted. We don't know if it's okay to show our true colors. We don't know whether we can trust who we're with to accept us just the way we are. So we have to go through that whole process of coming out again and again and again, and it's pretty tiring. This is a quote that was in a PFLAG brochure, PFLAG, Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, and it was a quote by a young gay man, and he said, "We never leave those initial experiences of guilt and shame behind." And I put that in there because I'm thinking about that, and I think, wow, initial experiences of guilt and shame. I remember when I was very young, 6 years old, and knowing, not understanding at all, of course I couldn't understand, but knowing I was different, and already that guilt and shame was there. And like I said, I grew up in a church that didn't even talk about that. So it's societal, it's systemic, it's there, whether we want it to be or not. And I think that's important for straight people to know. And in 2022 alone, 220 bills were introduced in state and national legislatures curbing LGBT rights in one way or another. You think we don't feel that? Of course we do. Even if we're living in Palm Springs, which is the gay capital of America, and we don't have to put up with straight people much, because it really is a gay retirement community. But even there, when we read about this in the paper, and then that's the last one, every newscast about LGBT rights and hate crimes and suicide rates, it reminds us of how much we are detested. And that's pretty strong language, isn't it? But that's the way it feels. It feels like we're detested. And you need to know that. And the reason you need to know that is because when you have that senior boy coming into your room to be counseled, and he says something about being gay, how you respond in that very first moment is important. And he will pick up on that. And so that's why we're going through all of this stuff, is to hopefully help you in those moments, okay? Another thing I want you to know is it's not about the sex. I and many of my gay friends have the feeling, and that's just a feeling, it feels like that for many straight folks, gay equals sex, and then when they think of gay sex, they go, ooh, that's nasty, okay? And then you just stop. You don't let us in anymore, okay? And that's really sad because it goes way deeper than sex. My gayness goes way deeper, but most don't want to find out about that. Most people don't ask me about what life is really like for me as a gay person. And even my own kids, my adult children, they don't ask me about how things are going with me and Sherman. My husband, they don't want to know about that. They don't ask about how things are going in Palm Springs because I might say something about gay. Now, I'm not going to say anything about gay sex, but maybe it feels like that's their fear, that they might feel that. Maybe I can illustrate that by sharing about when I was married. My ex-wife always said to me, "You're not there for me." And I didn't really understand what that meant because I was a good dad and I was a good provider. She didn't have to work until the kids went to school and she wanted to. And I was pretty good in the bedroom. And well, actually I was an overachiever. So I mean, that's what we gay people do. We have to cover up for ourselves. So I made sure. Now, even after she learned that I was struggling with same-sex attraction, she continued to say, "You're not there for me," and I continued to be dumb and not know what that meant. But I tell you what, as soon as I was divorced and came out and moved to Kansas City and fell in love with a man, I knew what she meant. I knew why I wasn't there for her because I couldn't be. I don't have the capacity to love her in that way. And I'm not talking about the sex. I'm talking about, the intimacy thing that you can have with another person. I couldn't have that with her. Now, I loved her to the extent that I could, and we had a lot of fun together, but I could not be there for her, and she knew that. And I didn't, like I said, until I fell in love with God. He didn't fall in love with me, so that's a whole other story. But anyway, I think that's important for you to know. That relates to the fact that my gayness is who I am. It's not just something that I do. It's really who I am, okay? So, the extension part of this, what can I say that will help you to be a better counselor for your LGBT youth? Well, I couch this in terms of affirmative practice, and you've probably all studied that. You've heard that. It's been around since 1970s, late 70s, early 80s. And the assumption with the affirmative practice is simply that sexual and gender identity different from heterosexual and cisgender experience are normal, and moreover that acknowledging and affirming identity and experiences is a critical component of helping clients integrate their identity with the rest of their lived experience. And I love this because of that word right there. Let's say it together. Normal. You see, we gay people haven't been called that very much. We're always the weirdos. We're always the ones on the edge. We're the ones on the outside. We don't get to experience normalcy. And so I love this because it says that even if my sexual and gender identity is different from yours, it's still, let's say it together again, normal. Yes, okay. So I love that. And I think it's very important for us to think about that as counselors. And I think it's important as we have a student come into or a client come into our office that we think about that. Am I looking at this person as a normal person, or have I already put up a little bit of a shutter because he said the G word, or the L word, or the T word, or the B word, or the Q word? It just goes on and on. But, if we're not careful about that, like I said, they will pick up on it. So, let's continue forward. These are just some suggestions, okay? my first suggestion to you is don't be afraid to question. And by that I mean don't be afraid to question what you're believing, okay? My firm belief is that organized religion, and I don't care what church or what group you're talking about, but by and large, organized religion does not want you to think about it, okay? They want you to accept what they say. And I was a company man when I was a Southern Baptist preacher. I had questions, but I knew better than to ask them. I just followed the directions and did what I was supposed to do. And later on, I really began to question, and some of that stuff I don't believe because I don't believe it. I just don't. But so I'm not telling you what to believe. That's up to you. I'm just saying don't be afraid to question. If even a word or has sparked a thought in your mind, dig through it. Google it. It's wonderful to Google stuff. This whole talk has been Googled. Well, not all of it, because I didn't find the part about it's not about the sex. That's neat. Okay. Embrace every learning opportunity. I want to encourage you to hang on to whatever you can do and study on your own. Like I said, Google topics, and you'll find so much information out there. So many theses have been written about the homosexual community and its relationship to society and culture and everything. So there's so much out there. And if your organization has a diversity day and they're going to bring somebody in, don't sit in the teacher's lounge and say, "Oh God, we're going to go talk about sex and queers and all that again today." Don't do that. Be excited. Go in there and act like you're going to learn, and drag your other teachers in there, because I know it's not you that do that. It's those other people. But they do it, right? I've been there. This is not my first rodeo. Okay. The next one is to watch your language. My mom used to say that to me a lot. And there's, by what I mean by that is, well, that's how we communicate. Now, you can turn somebody off just by the way you look, and I've mentioned that, but how we communicate is so very important. And talking, how you talk, and there are some things that just don't fit. When that person comes in and talks to you about the fact that he thinks maybe he's gay, don't say things like, and I know you're doing it being positively, not you, those other people I'm talking about. I know they do it being positive. They say, oh, you don't strike me as being gay. Well, he didn't really come in to find out how he struck you, that's not positive to him, because it just pretty much took the wind out of his sails and said, oh, where do I go from here? Another comment, you're way too masculine or quote feminine to be gay. That doesn't have a thing to do with it. It's who I am on the inside, okay? Of all the people in your class, I would never have guessed that you're the gay one. Oh, well, those are comments that have been made at one time or another. And then the one that really gets me is, maybe it's just a phase. And that one hits me hard, because when I was a sophomore in college, I went to Lafayette Student Health Center and made an appointment with a counselor. And you think that didn't take a lot of nerve? Sat down with that counselor and told him that I was really struggling because I thought I was gay. And he said those very words. Maybe it's just a phase. Why don't you come back in 3 weeks and we'll talk about it? And do you think I ever went back? Not a bit. But I tell you what I did do. I sat around and worried for days about the fact that somewhere in Lafayette Health Center there was a record with my name on it that had the word homosexuality connected to it. That's what I thought. So see, it's just so important that we use language. Reminded of the mother whose son comes out to her, and she breaks down tears, and which is not uncommon for mothers, whatever you tell them. But no, not really. But of course, the son thinks that she hates him, and it's all over. And she sees that on his face. She says, "No, I'm okay with it. And you don't need to worry about it. You'll always be my son. I love you, whether you're gay or not. It's fine." She said, "I'm just crying because it's just such a hard life." And And she was trying to be positive, but she just put a negative on it. She just told him, your life sucks, buddy. And so even those little things are very important. And, in this day and age, we have even more things to learn about language, pronouns, all of that. And if you've sat in a teacher's lounge and heard people say, oh, I don't know why I have to learn they and them and all of that, it just doesn't even make sense. But you learn the student's name, so if they want to be called they or them, is that such a big deal? It really isn't, but we have so many walls, and we need to get past that, okay? I had a little trans girl when I was here in Topeka, and this was, 12, 15 years ago, and it was not near as common as it is now. And she transferred into our building because she was having trouble in her building. And the building I was in happened to have restrooms in every classroom. So it was perfect for her to be able to be in our school because she didn't have to go to the nurse's office to go to the bathroom. And I call her a trans girl. She was really I get confused. Her name was Nicole, but she wanted to be Nick, okay? I'm trying to get to the point that the teachers are the ones that had all the trouble in the world calling this little girl Nick, because she was not a girl, she was a boy. On the inside, she was a boy, she'd been a boy. Her mother was wonderful. I sat down with her mother to talk about how we could help her, and her mother said, she's been this way since she was 3 years old. She's never been our little girl. She's always been a little boy. And so we did our best, and but it was the adults in the room that had the hardest time. The kids accepted it right off. Nick went out and played with the boys and had a great time, but the kids didn't. So learn about that. I can't, when I say watch your language, that sounds rude and ugly, but I don't mean it that way. I just mean learn about what the good things to say are, and you can, okay? Be aware of minority stress. Your LGBTQ students are going to be in a minority, but if you study minority stress, you know that there's a lot more than just that. I was thinking, wow, what if the young man that walks in is a trans girl who's now a boy, identifies as gay. He happens to be black, and his adoptive parents are white Jewish people. Well, there's a lot of minority there. I kind of went overboard trying to get the minorities out. But you see that a lot of intersectionality happens. There's intersections where lives hit lots of different points. And so we just need to be aware of that, study that if you haven't, and learn how to cope, because it's there. I think it's important to learn the history. That's, in our day and age, kind of a hot topic. I mean, there are places where they're trying to teach us what happened in America that didn't really happen and all of that. So I think it's important that we learn the history. And there's a lot of gay history that a lot of people don't know about that relates to who I am, and it's part of my heritage. So as a counselor, it might be good for you to know. How many of you know what Stonewall is? Anybody? If you know about Stonewall, that's when the riots happened in New York City and really started the gay pride movement. What about, anybody know what a pink triangle means? Just a few. Pink triangles are what Hitler's Germany, the Hitler people made the gay people wear pink triangles to pull them out so they would know who those people were. What about Harvey Milk? How many of you know who Harvey Milk is? Yeah, a little more, because there's been some movies about him. He was the first out gay San Francisco councilman, and he was assassinated in 1978. Those kind of things are important to us because they give us something to hold on to, and they draw us together. And how many of you get upset because we have gay pride? Don't raise your hand, I don't want to know. But there are a lot of straight people that get upset because they say, well, we don't have a straight pride. What, you don't really need one, because you're already together. And see, we are so diverse that gay pride doesn't mean we don't have an agenda. We're not out recruiting people because we don't believe that works. But we just have a day where we get together and we feel safe and comfortable with our own people. And we invite you in. And in fact, a lot of the gay pride movements now have as many straight people with them, and we love that because you're our allies, and we appreciate that very much. But learn the history because it'll help you. And then be conscious of judgment. You see, your religious upbringing, whether you were in a church or out, even just it being part of the society, has taught you to be a judge. Okay, right? Because you've got to know what's right and wrong. You've got to decide what's right and wrong. And in your setting, you might even have to help some other people decide what's right and wrong. Well, that makes you a judge. But sometimes our judgments can get in the way. And so I just say be conscious of that, because there is a whole thing of unconscious bias. And if you're unconscious about, what you're even thinking, then that can get in the way. And I do believe I'm right when I say that if you carry a judgment against gay people and you're counseling with a gay student or a gay client, they're going to pick up on that relatively quick. You don't have to say much about it. They'll pick up on it, okay? So, am I telling you to get rid of your judgment? Well, I'd like that, but no, I'm just telling you to handle it. Just make sure it doesn't come out. I don't care what judgment you have about me, but if you're counseling with me, don't let those come out and get in our way, okay? And then don't be afraid to make mistakes, because we all make mistakes. Have I made any mistakes today? Yeah, I can't even run the button. Okay, and then finally, the last point is celebrate, celebrate, celebrate. I think that's what the whole affirmative practice is about, getting to the point where you can celebrate each and every individual life, okay? When that person walks into your counseling office, that's the biggest compliment you can get, is because they had some kind of faith in you to help them with whatever it is. And if you can help them or if you can celebrate their life, they will sense that. They will know that you're celebrating them, okay? And so I encourage you to do that, to find that point where you can. And that brings us, what time is it?
You've had 47 minutes.
Okay, well, we're going to do this real quick. This is the closing. This is our poem. I said, 3 points poem as a prayer poem. I brought this in just because as I was thinking about the whole thing, this is a song actually called Singing for Our Lives. And it speaks, I think, to the whole gay community. It says, we are a gentle, angry people, okay? We're singing for our lives. We are young and old together. We are gay and straight together. We are a justice-seeking people. That's who we are, and we want you to know that. And I think if you put that into your whole process, it will help you. So I'm going to close with this, and it's not just a poem, it's a song. And this song is going to be sung by the Heartland Men's Chorus, which is the gay chorus I sang with in Kansas City. And that if you see the walls there, that is the Equality House over here in Topeka. And this was in 2016, and the chorus sang outside of by the Equality House across the street from Westboro Baptist Church. And they start with that verse right there, and they're going to sing this song. And the director's going to invite you to sing along with them. And if you want to sing along, I invite you to sing along too, because it's a good song.
People, and we are singing for our lives. Sing with us if you want to. We are young and old together. We are young and old together, and we are singing for our lives. We are young and old together, and we are singing for our lives.
Oh, let's sing.
We are gay and straight together, and we are singing for our lives. We are gay and straight together, and we are singing for our lives.
sinking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. So, that's it. That's who we are. That's who I am. And I think we're out of time, and I didn't allow any time for questioning, but the joy of being the last person on the thing is if you want to stay around and ask questions, or if you have comments, I'm here and I'm glad to share anything with you. So, thank you.
Everybody needs me to sign for their CDs, or you gotta do that.
I thought you could do your poem.